August 23, 1943. Newport News, Virginia. The air smelled of coal smoke, salt, and something sweet the Germans couldn't quite place. The gangway creaked as hundreds of prisoners of war shuffled down from the gray transport ship, boots clanging on metal. Shackles were gone now. Only rope lines and bayonets kept order. The sun was hotter than most of them expected America to be, a heavy warmth that made the wool of their field gray tunics itch. Oberstfreiter Karl Weber squinted against the light, one hand raised to shield his eyes. Weeks at sea had left his skin pale and tight, like paper. All around him, men murmured, their voices a low current of nervous German. "Rückzug. Don't stop," an American sergeant barked, his accent chewing up the German words. "Keep moving." You're walking down the gangway with them, stepping from the steel shadow of the ship into the wide, noisy brightness of an American port. Seagulls wheel overhead. Cranes screech and groan. Somewhere, a radio plays a fast swing tune, muted by distance and shouting. Karl glanced sideways at Lieutenant Ernst Vogel, who walked a few steps ahead. Before the war, Vogel had studied engineering in Munich. Now he moved with the exhausted stiffness of a man who'd learned how fragile all plans really were. "This is it," Vogel murmured, not quite turning his head. "America. It looks normal," one of the younger soldiers behind them muttered. "I thought it would be made of chrome." Karl almost smiled. Then his eyes focused past the line of guards, toward the edge of the docks. Rows of trucks waited there, more trucks than he'd ever seen in one place. Olive-drab GMCs and Studebakers, engines idling, exhaust rising in lazy, gray-blue ribbons. Beyond them, farther up the hill, he saw more vehicles on a road that vanished inland. Cars, buses, even a few gleaming shapes with chrome bumpers catching the light. He felt something tighten in his chest. "Look at the tires," he whispered. "They're all new." "What?" Vogel asked. "In North Africa," Karl said. "We were patching the same tires until the canvas showed through. Look at theirs." They trudged closer. The details sharpened. Every truck seemed fresh from the factory. Straight frames, clean lines, canvas covers without patches. American drivers leaned on fenders, smoking, joking, barely glancing at the prisoners. To them, this was just another load. As the German column reached the edge of the pier, the line halted. An officer in a crisp American uniform, captain's bars on his shoulders, clipboard in hand, conferred quickly with an MP sergeant. Names were checked against lists, numbers shouted, men counted. Karl's attention wandered again to the motor pool, and then he saw it. At first he thought it was some kind of staff car, a long, low shape sitting slightly apart from the trucks, like a purebred horse tied beside work mules. The paint was flat army olive, and someone had bolted a crude wooden platform where the luxurious rear body should have been. A stack of crates sat on that platform now, tied down with rope. Mud splashed the wheel arches. The front grille, though tall, vertical, with thin chrome bars catching the light through the paint, gave it away. His breath caught. Das ist in Duesenberg," he whispered. Vogel turned sharply. "What? That car," Karl said, pointing with his chin to avoid drawing a guard's attention. "That's a Duesenberg chassis. It must be. Look at the grille. The wheels. No one else built them like that." The name ran through the group like a spark. Duesenberg. Impossible. What would a Duesenberg be doing on a dock? Back in Germany, the word meant legend. The car of American millionaires, the kind of machine they'd seen only in glossy magazine photos passed around barracks, in stories about film stars and industrial tycoons. Massive straight-eight engines. Hand-built luxury. Machines more valuable than many houses. Now one of them sat here, stripped and hacked into a cargo mule, hauling boxes like a farm wagon. An American private sauntered over to the vehicle. He climbed into the driver's seat, boots casually on the running board, and twisted the key. The engine caught with a deep, smooth rumble, muted under the canvas and crates, but still different, more refined, than the rattling coughs of the trucks. The private slapped the side of the wooden bed and laughed at something his friend shouted. Karl swallowed hard. "They're using a Duesenberg as a truck," he said slowly, as if the words themselves were heavy. "As a cargo hauler." Vogel followed his gaze, eyes narrowing. For a moment, the engineer replaced the officer. He saw not just a car, but a symbol. "How many of those did they build?" Vogel asked quietly. "Not many," Karl said. "Hundreds, not thousands." "So that," Vogel murmured. Is a car made for millionaires? Was, Carl corrected. Was. A nearby guard, a tall American with a sunburned neck and a Thompson slung low, noticed where the Germans were staring. He smirked. Yeah, he called out in accented, school-taught German. Fancy car, huh? No one answered. You boys like that? The guard went on, seeming amused by their silence. Boss says it used to belong to some rich guy in New York. We chopped the back off. Hall's ammo now. Heck of a waste, if you ask me. He shrugged, as if butchering a masterpiece of engineering into a flatbed was nothing worth thinking about. Come on, he added, gesturing with the barrel of his gun. You'll see more. This is just the dock. Just the dock. The line began to move again, boots scuffing, chains of thought unraveling in every man's head. You can almost feel the calculations going on behind their eyes. What Germany could build, what it could spare, how carefully it had to allocate its few precious resources. And here, in America, a car built for the richest of the rich was unceremoniously turned into a piece of dockyard equipment. Just another tool. Vogel walked in silence for a while, eyes fixed on the endless rows of trucks, cranes, warehouses, and railway tracks that spread out from the port like veins. Finally, he leaned closer to Carl, keeping his voice low so the guards wouldn't hear. If they can waste a Duesenberg like that, he said, what else can they afford to waste? Carl didn't answer. He didn't need to. As they were herded toward the waiting trucks, the engine of the mutilated Duesenberg rumbled past them, its crates rattling, its once silken ride now burdened and rough. It smelled of oil and gasoline and possibility that belonged entirely to the other side. The canvas flaps snapped in the wind as the truck rolled out from the port and into the wide, open country beyond. The Germans sat shoulder to shoulder in the back, wrists resting on their knees, helmets gone, caps pulled low against the sun. Carl sat near the tailgate, gripping the wooden bench as the tires bounced over a rail crossing. Coal trains rumbled by on parallel tracks, mile-long chains of steel cars filled to overflowing with ore, lumber, steel beams, machinery. One train faded into the distance, and then another appeared immediately behind it, just as long, just as heavy. The rhythm seemed endless. It's like watching a river of metal, Carl murmured. Private Dietrich Hoffman, only 19 and still with a boyish slope to his shoulders, leaned forward. They must have emptied the entire coast to build this. No, Vogel said bleakly. This is only one city. The truck convoy merged onto a highway, wide, smooth, and shockingly clean. Asphalt stretched like a racetrack into the horizon. Civilian cars passed the military vehicles without hesitation, as if the presence of a war passing through their towns was just another traffic inconvenience. Children on bicycles raced the convoy for a moment before veering off toward ice cream stands. A billboard showed a woman laughing while holding a bottle of Coca-Cola, its red color bright enough to hurt the eye. Another advertisement boasted Fords and Chevrolets arriving at dealerships daily. Carl thought of Germany's ration cards, of gasoline locked behind military permissions, of the way cities dimmed their lights because every drop of fuel, every scrap of rubber, every ounce of metal mattered. Here, it felt like abundance poured from the ground. The truck slowed as they approached a small town, white storefronts with striped awnings, a clock tower rising above the square. People paused to stare at the passing prisoners. Some looked curious, some wary. A few even waved, children holding small American flags. Carl wasn't sure which reaction unsettled him more. The convoy pulled into a rest area beside a row of fuel pumps. A soldier climbed down from the cab and stretched, cracking his knuckles before waving at a local mechanic to come over. They laughed together, pointing at something on the engine. Vogel watched intently. They're refueling these trucks like they're lighting cigarettes, he said. No fear of scarcity. No calculation. The mechanic wiped his hands on a rag and casually threw it aside. The sight confused Carl for a moment. Then he realized what bothered him. The rag was clean, still white. Back home rags were patched, reused until they were practically threads. A line of American soldiers emerged from a cafeteria building carrying glass bottles clinking in their arms. Root beer, orange soda, Coca-Cola, cold and sweating with condensation. Dietrich stared wide-eyed. Is that for them? One of the Americans noticed. With a shrug, he pulled a bottle from his stack and tossed it underhand toward the prisoner's truck. It bounced off the tailgate and shattered on the pavement, brown liquid foaming across the asphalt. The soldiers laughed and kept walking. Not cruelly, not thoughtfully, as casually as dropping a pebble in a pond. Carl's mind replayed it. Ice, glass, liquid sugar. Luxury, he thought. Wasted. A guard tapped the side of the truck with the butt of his rifle. Let's go. And the engine growled back to life. As the convoy rolled on, the evidence continued to stack around them like silent testimony. Tires as thick as tree trunks. Garages filled with spare parts. Rows of tractors plowing golden fields stretching further than the eye could see. Everywhere Carl looked, America seemed to shout the same message. We have more. We can build more. We can waste more. The truck turned off the highway onto a rougher road, climbing gently between wooded slopes and farmland. The sunlight dappled through branches, and for a brief moment, the land looked almost peaceful, like a place untouched by war. Dietrich, gazing out at a farmhouse with smoke curling from its chimney, whispered a question that felt both innocent and terrifying. How do you fight a country that doesn't even notice the war? No one answered, because they were all thinking the same thing. The convoy passed another yard, this one filled with cars under canvas covers. The wind lifted a corner of one cover just long enough for Carl to glimpse another unmistakable grill. Another Duesenberg, stripped bare, painted dull green, waiting to be turned into something useful. Carl's voice broke as he spoke. They're using them like scrap, like spare horses. Vogel's jaw tightened. His eyes didn't move from the car. This is not a war of armies, he finally said. It is a war of factories. The road dipped. A sign ahead marked the entrance to a sprawling compound. Fences, guard towers, barracks. A POW camp. But the real imprisonment had already begun. Because what the Germans had witnessed on the road here, America's casual strength, its careless wealth, would follow them into every night's sleep. Carl stared at the endless machinery of America rolling past the truck bed and understood something he had never allowed himself to think. Germany could win 100 battles and still lose this war. The convoy slowed to a stop. Gates opened. The New World had delivered its verdict. The gate clanged shut behind the convoy, steel rattling against steel. The POW camp stretched wide across the fields, rows of wooden barracks laid out with rigid precision. Fresh lumber, strong fencing, watchtowers built from thick beams that looked newer than some of the barracks Carl had slept in on the Eastern Front. The trucks came to a halt. Guards opened the tailgates and motioned the prisoners down. Grass, thick, green grass under their boots. Carl stared at it for a moment. Grass that hadn't been churned into mud by artillery, grass unscarred by war. It was almost unnerving. Inside the camp, American military police assigned bunks and issued blankets. Clean blankets, softer than anything Carl had felt in years. The mattresses had real springs. The straw inside didn't smell of mildew or rats. Dietrich ran a hand across the fabric, disbelief widening his eyes. In France, he whispered, they said Americans let their prisoners starve. Carl shook his head slightly. In France, they also told us America had no stomach for war. The barrack door opened with a squeak. An American corporal walked in, carrying a stack of folded leaflets. He set them on a table and tapped them with 2 fingers. For you, he said in German. Camp rules. Meal times. Recreation. No fighting. He said, recreation, like it was normal. Like prisoners should expect hobbies. The corporal left as casually as he had arrived. Vogel took one of the leaflets and scanned it. His brow furrowed. They have a library, he murmured. And a football field. Classes, carpentry, welding, even English lessons. Dietrich snatched a copy of his own. We get to play football? Before Vogel could respond, a bell rang outside. Lunchtime. The prisoners filed into a bright mess hall, long tables arranged beneath electric lights that hummed softly. The smell hit them first, warm bread, stew, vegetables. A scent of actual nourishment. Carl held out his tin plate, expecting watery soup or boiled cabbage. Instead, a cook ladled thick beef stew into it. Chunks of meat and potatoes simmered in rich brown broth. A warm roll landed beside it. Dietrich stared at his portion. This is for us, he asked the cook. For you. The man confirmed, wiping his hands on his apron. Eat up. You boys look like you need it. Carl tasted the stew. Salt. Fat. Flavor. He closed his eyes for a moment. It felt decadent. Around him, Murmurs spread among the Germans, soft disbelief, careful bites turning into desperate eating. They devoured the food like it might vanish, and yet the servers brought more. No one counted portions. No one scolded them. A young American private leaned against the wall, watching the prisoners eat. He whispered to another soldier, "They thought we'd starve him like they did in Europe?" The second soldier snorted, "Boss says we're feeding him same as us. Army rules." Carl pretended not to hear, but he did. Every word. After the meal, the prisoners were escorted into the yard. Tall pines swayed in the breeze. The sun felt warmer than before, or maybe Carl simply noticed it now that his stomach wasn't empty. A group of Americans rolled a crate toward the field. They pried it open and pulled out sports equipment. Soccer balls, baseball bats, even boxing gloves. Dietrich laughed, an honest, startled laugh he probably hadn't made in years. "You think they brought this just for us?" he asked. Vogel watched silently, tension creeping into his voice. "No," he said. "They had all of this already. They didn't need to prepare. They didn't need to ration. They didn't need to worry." Carl followed Vogel's gaze to a motor pool just outside the fence. Trucks, hundreds of them, sat waiting. Some looked untouched. Others were newly delivered. There, beside the fence, was another Duesenberg chassis. Its once glossy body mounted with racks of lumber, a tow hook welded to the rear. A workhorse now. A beast of burden. Carl clenched his jaw. Luxury had become scrap. Scrap had become strength. Strength had become normal. Back home, Carl said quietly, "Our best cars are on the front. Our factories are bombed. Our fuel is nearly gone." Vogel finished the thought. "And here? They're millionaires' toys or spare parts." The wind carried voices, American soldiers laughing, singing a tune from a distant radio. Not a song about war. A love song. The kind that belonged to peacetime. Carl looked at the ball bouncing across the yard, at Dietrich chasing after it with childlike joy, and the realization settled deeper in his bones than hunger ever had. The Americans had not gone to war. Their wealth had, and the Germans would never catch up. A loudspeaker crackled overhead. "Evening count soon." Carl exhaled slowly. If everything here was this abundant, what waited on the front lines? Night fell over the camp like a soft blanket instead of a curtain of fear. The barracks were quiet except for the occasional creak of a bunk or the sigh of a man trying to sleep. Outside, the towers were lit with electric floodlights, steady, reliable beams that hummed with power. Power that never flickered. Carl lay on his back, staring up at the rafters. The boards above him looked new, cut from thick timber, not the brittle scrap we'd used in so many German billets. The air carried no stench of rot or diesel, just pine, clean laundry, civilization. Across the aisle, Vogel sat on his bunk with a notebook open on his knee. Where he'd gotten the pencil, Carl didn't know, but he recognized the posture. Vogel thinking, measuring, calculating. "You should sleep," Carl whispered. "I can't," Vogel replied. He tapped the pencil lightly, leaving a dot on the page. "I'm trying to understand," he continued. "Trying to quantify what we saw today." Carl turned slightly, listening. "2 Duesenbergs at the port," Vogel said, voice low. "One at the highway station. One here." He paused. "There may be more." Carl nodded slowly. "Even 4 is astonishing. That's a fortune in Germany. But here," Vogel said, "they cannibalize them. Strip them for utility. They don't treasure what they have. They just use it." The pencil moved again. "Numbers. Comparisons. Ratios. I want to know," Vogel said, "how many trucks they can build in a month." "In a week," Carl murmured. Vogel's jaw tightened. "They could replace everything we lose before we even finish the paperwork." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the hum of an engine rumbled briefly, another shipment arriving at the camp even at this hour. Work never stopped here. Machines never slept. "It's not just industry," Vogel continued softly. "It's scale. It's waste tolerance." Carl frowned. "Waste tolerance?" "Yes," Vogel said, leaning forward. "America can afford to throw away what we would guard with our lives. Their factories can flood the world with supplies faster than we can train men to use them." His voice dropped further. "We measure the cost of every bullet. They measure production by the minute." Carl thought of the trucks at the port, the endless trains, the food, the lights, the Duesenberg hauling ammunition like a pack mule. "How do you beat wealth?" Carl asked quietly. "You don't," Vogel answered. "Not when it's this large, this careless." Across the room, Dietrich already slept, arms curled under his head, mouth slightly open. A boy again, as if the war had already ended for him. Karl watched him breathe. He remembered the propaganda posters, the speeches about German ingenuity, sacrifice, steel. The idea that discipline and determination could overcome any obstacle. But here, locked behind a fence, he had seen something discipline could not defeat. A country so rich that even its luxuries were expendable. Footsteps passed outside the window, an American guard on patrol. He was humming the same carefree tune that drifted from the radio earlier. It didn't sound like a soldier in a desperate struggle. It sounded like someone passing the time. Vogel closed his notebook. These trucks, he said, these cars, they are just the visible part. Beneath the surface, shipyards, refineries, mines, universities. They have a machine behind this machine. Karl exhaled through his nose. And we walked right into the heart of it. The lights clicked off at a consistent hour, no blackout curtains needed. No fear of bombers in the night. For a long time, neither man spoke. Then Karl whispered the question they had both been avoiding. Do you think Berlin knows? Vogel didn't answer. The silence was enough. Gradually, the barracks settled into quiet breathing and distant crickets. But Karl remained awake, eyes open, mind racing, replaying every moment since they'd stepped off the ship. The port, the highway, the trucks. The luxury car turned supply mule. The waste. The excess. The power. By the time sleep finally pulled him under, one truth had rooted itself deep beneath his ribs. Germany had lost long before he ever became a prisoner. Morning arrived not with reveille or shouted orders, but with the smell of frying eggs drifting through the barracks. Karl blinked into the warm light, filtering past the orderly row of windows. He half wondered if he'd dreamed the previous day, but the soft mattress beneath him and the quiet hum of a distant generator confirmed it. This was real. Breakfast was more shocking than lunch had been. Plates stacked with scrambled eggs, toast, fruit, oatmeal, foods he had nearly forgotten existed in such quantity. Guards moved through the line casually, cups of steaming coffee in hand. The Germans ate slower today. The first hunger had passed. Now each bite tasted of bewilderment. Vogel chewed silently, staring into the middle distance. He looked as though he'd aged years overnight, not from exhaustion, but from understanding. After the meal, the prisoners were escorted into the yard. A dry breeze carried the faint scent of fuel and cut grass. A whistle blew, and groups were assigned to work details, cutting wood, tending gardens, maintaining fences. Nothing harsh, nothing cruel. Karl volunteered for grounds work, hoping to clear his mind. He found himself mowing near the fence line where the motor pool lay beyond. Engines idled and grumbled, a mechanical heartbeat under the soft rustle of trees. An American mechanic slid out from beneath a large truck, grease blackening his hands and forearms. He tossed a wrench into a toolbox and dug around before pulling out a fresh one from a crate overflowing with spares. Karl glanced at Vogel, who was stacking firewood nearby. In Russia, Karl said quietly, a single wrench would be chained to the workshop bench so no one could steal it. That crate has dozens. Vogel nodded. Tools are like ammunition here, he said. They don't think twice. The mechanic wiped his hands on a discarded rag and called over to a sergeant, his voice easy and light. Sir, they want us to junk that Packard in Bay 4. Says we need the engine faster than the chassis. Junk it, the sergeant scoffed. That thing was new last year. Doesn't matter, the mechanic laughed. We got more coming. Karl looked sharply at Vogel. Packard. Vogel's lips pulled tight. One of their fine automobiles. Expensive. High-end. Karl stared at the truck they were repairing, a standard work vehicle, and tried to imagine one of Germany's prized Mercedes-Benz staff cars being thrown aside for parts. He couldn't. The fence offered no psychological comfort. On the other side lay more proof of the impossible. Innovations turned ordinary, wealth turned routine. At midday, they returned to the yard. A baseball game had begun among the prisoners, bat cracking, men shouting as if war weren't raging across continents. Dietrich sprinted around the bases barefoot, laughing breathlessly. Karl watched him play and wondered how many soldiers on the front, on either side, would kill for one afternoon like this. Behind him, he heard Boots approach. An American officer, older, with a graying mustache and calm eyes, stood observing the Germans as they relaxed between tasks. His uniform was neat but not showy. Authority carried lightly. He spoke fluent German. You fought well, he said quietly to Karl. Your people are brave. Disciplined. Karl wasn't sure how to respond. He straightened instinctively. The officer's gaze drifted toward the motor pool. But war isn't won by bravery alone, he continued. It's won by the ability to keep fighting. Day after day, factory after factory. He looked directly at Karl, voice soft enough that no guard would overhear. We have factories you haven't seen. Mines that run without stopping. Oil fields that stretch for miles. Colleges turning out engineers faster than your bombers can drop their bombs. Karl's throat felt dry. The officer's expression held neither cruelty nor pride. Just truth. You Germans build marvels, he said. Panthers. Tigers. Aircraft with genius in every bolt. He paused. We build enough to bury them. The words hit like artillery, quiet, precise, undeniable. The officer gave a final nod and walked away, boots crunching over gravel. Vogel approached slowly, having overheard enough. You see it now, don't you? He asked. Karl didn't speak. He couldn't. The realization he'd tried to ignore since the docks now crystallized into certainty. Germany hadn't misjudged American firepower. It had misjudged American indifference. To America, war production was merely a shift in what the factories made. To Germany, it was the nation's lifeblood squeezed drop by drop. Karl looked through the fence at the endless rows of engines, tires, tools, machines, spare strength waiting to be awakened. At the Duesenberg still hauling crates with aristocratic dignity buried under mud and ropes. A luxury car turned laborer. A metaphor no propaganda could fight. He whispered, barely audible. We are not prisoners of war. We are witnesses to why we lost. Vogel placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded once, solemnly. Somewhere beyond the hills, a train whistle sounded. Another convoy of supplies, another river of iron. On and on and on, until victory was simply the logical result of momentum. A country so rich it could waste genius. A country so powerful it didn't need to boast. A country that treated luxury like scrap metal, and still had more left over. Karl closed his eyes. Now he understood. Germany could not starve America. Germany could not exhaust America. Germany could not outlast America. The war would end not with Germany's surrender, but with America's abundance. And the Germans, sitting on clean grass beneath a peaceful sky, could do nothing but watch the future roll by on well-oiled wheels.